Hello, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. I'm excited once again to have a great guest on today who's going to share his story with you. His name is Nelson Lee. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, his aunt is a really good friend of mine. I went to high school with her, Andrea, and she kind of reached out to me and lined this up. So I'm grateful for her, and so a shout out to her. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea. She is awesome.
Yeah, she really is. She's amazing, and but I do appreciate you taking some time to come out to talk with us. I want to thank our sponsor, Veracity Networks, and for making this possible. So thank you so much. And for your listeners, once again, thank you for taking the time. And here's, get ready for another great story. So Nelson Lee, you have a company called Building Brainwaves. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that right off the bat here.
So really, that was the brainchild that came out of my experience with anxiety, OCD, and depression, and a lot of the gaps that I found trying to get better from that and trying to improve my mental health. And I found that there were a lot of things that were missed either by therapists or just education-wise that I really benefited from over the years. And so Building Brainwaves is all about filling those gaps. Very
cool. Well, we'll get more into that. I'm excited to hear more about that. Growing up, you said you struggled with, obsessive compulsive disorder and some anxiety and depression as well. And, paralyze you from doing certain things in your life and cause some pain and heartache in your life. But, it's cool how you've taken that challenge and you're now doing this company called Building Brainwaves. And so I'm excited to hear all this and to hear your perspective on this. And I think our listeners will learn from this as well. But let's first start. Give us a little background on you, a little where you grew up and a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I grew up in Draper, Utah. I feel like I had a really standard childhood and adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up with a great family, went to Alta High School. My high school years were also very normal. Played lacrosse, was really big into outdoor sports like mountain biking and skiing, and had a really solid friend group, that type of thing. So there really weren't any red flags growing up. Things seemed pretty normal.
Well, did you notice though at a younger age that you felt this anxiety that you say you struggled with, or the OCD?
What's interesting is if you asked me then, I would say no. I felt very normal. I remember having conversations with friends and talking about, I don't know how anyone would ever get depressed. I don't know how anyone would ever experience anxiety. But looking back now, there were signs, and I think I was experiencing more than I realized. I just wasn't in touch with what was going on.
Right. So, growing up, did you feel, it sounds like you felt like you were pretty confident then.
Yeah, I would say I was mostly confident, especially in the later years of high school. I think initially growing up in my younger teen years, and especially as a kid, I definitely was a little more quiet. I had some shyness, and I was a little insecure in that way, but it wasn't anything that was over the top. It didn't cripple me.
Right. Okay. So did it tend to get worse though than as you got older then?
So I feel like it actually got better. As I got older and went through high school, I really started to come out of my shell more.
Okay.
And just got more comfortable talking to other people, really being more confident in myself. And so that was something that just slowly came out as I got older, but it was definitely a process, and it was a slow process at that.
Yeah. So did you get any type of help back then, or is it just something you just kind of worked through on your own?
That was something that just happened totally on my own. It was something that I recognized in myself, so I at least had that inside. I knew that I didn't want to let that feeling of insecurity control me. Yeah, the insecurities that I did experience when I was younger, I just recognized them, and I realized that they weren't something that I wanted to let rule my life. And it was something that I knew I wouldn't let hold me back, and I knew that the life that I wanted was on the other side of that fear.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. That but you mentioned in your information that you had sent to me that this was. It sounded more crippling than you're making it sound now.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's because it really didn't hit me till I was 19. It didn't hit me till after high school.
Right. So let's talk about that for a minute. Like what was going on at age 19 that maybe that you were dealing with that maybe you started recognizing how things started getting worse?
So it really came out of the blue, and I think it was something where I was engaging in unhealthy behaviors for a really long period of time, and all of a sudden it just hit a breaking point.
So what were the unhealthy behaviors?
So I think a lot of the unhealthy behaviors were really, I think what it came down to was being reactive instead of proactive in life. And I felt like I was living more of a fear-based life. So essentially I would get impulses or fears would pop into my head and I would just react to them. And it could come down to even like thought-based fears. Like if you had just like any random fear come into your head and thinking, this is defining me as a person, this thought or this feeling. And I think I tried to control my feelings a lot. I tried to control, if I was feeling discomfort, so something like anxiety, or if I was feeling down, I felt like I had to get rid of that feeling. And so that's what was really damaging in the long run. And eventually it just hit a breaking point and I ended up having a panic attack. And that's what really kicked things off.
Okay. So it's more you were just dealing with the way you were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, but not necessarily doing any, you mentioned these unhealthy behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more just your thinking?
So it was mostly thinking when I was younger. Once things really got out of control and I had that first panic attack, that's when things became a little bit more extreme. And I mean, some of the examples, especially with OCD, my early signs, I used to love to check locks and things like that. Like before I'd go to bed, I was kind of the one in charge of locking up the house.
Okay.
And sometimes I would feel this impulse to, after I'd already checked, I wanted to check again. And it's like I felt like I never had checked in the first place. And basically the worry of what could happen if I don't check. And so that's just like a really basic example there.
Sure.
But it was that type of thinking that really infiltrated a lot of the different areas of my life. So, I mean, it could be socially, if I felt like I had maybe offended someone with something that I said, I felt like I needed to go clear things up with them. I felt like I really needed to like double check on that relationship. Yeah. And it's something where the more I engaged in that type of behavior and I went and checked or I went and tried to control something, the more it really solidified that pattern in my head and made it easier to have that happen in other areas of my life. And that's what kind of slowly started to get out of control, especially after I had that initial panic attack. Because when I had the panic attack, I had a really high level of anxiety that just stayed with me. And having that level of anxiety, it really made me feel like I had to do something about it. I had to get rid of it. And it caused me to do all these different, what we call compulsions in the world of OCD and anxiety. And it's essentially anything that you're doing to control your thoughts or your feelings, try to get them to go away. And so those were the type of behaviors that I was engaging in, and they can be in the physical realm. So things like actually physically checking a lock, or thought-based. Like an example of thought-based compulsions would be rerunning conversations in your head to make sure, you didn't say something dumb or anything like that. And so it can really manifest itself in a ton of different ways. Yeah. And people get really hung up on themes and different types of OCD, but the underlying pattern is very much the same.
Gotcha. Wow, very well said. Thank you for sharing that part. So this started, you noticed, around age 19. You mentioned you went on a mission, but you actually came home from it early because of these issues. And basically kind of what you were saying, you were going through these thought-based and also even physically based compulsions.
Yeah, exactly. And being on a mission, that's something I was involved with just with my faith. And really, I think the stresses of that is what really kind of brought everything out. It made me feel like I needed to control even more. And so engaging in those behaviors even more is what eventually brought it out. Yeah. And then it's also what allowed me to go down that hole more, I think, because I didn't understand why I had a panic attack. I didn't understand what the panic attack was. I still probably wouldn't have told someone that I was experiencing anxiety. I just didn't know what it was. Yeah. And so I think a lot of what led me down the wrong path was even just trying to figure out what had happened. Right. And I was rerunning that experience in my head over and over again. And it was just this cycle, and there was no end to it because there was no answer.
Yeah. Wow. So how long did this last for? So you obviously you're much better now in your life, and you've got this company that you're doing that deals with these kind of things. So this started around age 19, you said.
Mhm.
How many years did you get into this where it was a battle for you?
So it was a serious battle when I first came home from the mission. I remember trying to get help, and I had seen a few counselors, a few therapists, and I felt like they were helpful to some degree, but I
Mhm.
didn't feel like I was getting real solid skills that I could implement in my life. And so I feel like it took probably 6 months to a year to really get back on my feet and feel comfortable. And at that point, I was able to hold down a solid job and go to
Right.
school at the same time. So I mean, I was always able to live I guess what you could call like
Productive.
a productive life,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there was so much going on under the surface that was really unaddressed. And I mean, it took that year to get back on my feet, but I still was engaging in unhealthy behaviors
Right.
that I didn't recognize them. And it really, I would say it took a solid 6 years of kind of up and down to get a more solid understanding of it. And it took a lot of seeing different people. I eventually found someone who specialized in OCD, and
Okay.
they were able to really help me out and recognize, how the patterns were manifesting themselves under the surface. But even still, that was mostly for the things that were bothering me most. And so
Gotcha.
what was really helpful was I studied a lot on my own and realized, okay, these patterns are actually manifesting themselves in all these different areas of my life that don't necessarily bother me. And that's actually feeding the ones that do bother me. And so being able
Okay.
to recognize how my belief systems and how my judgments of thoughts and feelings was affecting everything. And it's not always in something that's uncomfortable for you.
Right. It's amazing how powerful our thoughts are, and how they can destroy us or they can lift us up to,
Mm-hmm.
that peace and that joy. And for you to, kind of go through this, it really comes down to you learning to control the way you think, or learning to not think,
Mm-hmm.
almost, right? Controlling that piece.
Exactly.
Right? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, I would say
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. So you said you did a lot of studying on your own. What type of
Mhm.
things were you studying and researching, I guess?
So from the beginning, I had been diagnosed with OCD and anxiety. I think general anxiety disorder as well. Just kind of got a whole bunch of labels stamped on me, which now I don't realize, or I don't feel like is a super helpful thing, because it can be easy to, I guess, identify with those labels and allow yourself to believe that that's going to be a controlling factor in your life.
Right.
But for me, it was really powerful to just dig deep and figure out, okay, what are the things that are involved in anxiety and OCD? What are those underlying patterns? How am I being influenced? And so a lot of my study was just around researching that. It was around researching anxiety in general, OCD, and looking at different resources. So people who had recovered, and realizing that when I first realized that there were people out there,
Yeah.
that was a big thing. I was like, okay, people are out there who are not letting this run their lives.
Wow.
And
Cool.
I mean, it was people on YouTube. There were some books that I got my hands on, and just general research like that helped me
Yeah.
kind of realize that, okay, like there are people who've got this under their belt. They've
Yeah.
got it figured out.
Well, and what's cool about what you're saying, I mean, social media can be really a negative thing in a person's life, but and the internet and that kind of thing. But man, there's also so much good that can come from it. Because I mean, the amount of research you can do now and the information you'll get back
Mhm.
is amazing,
It is.
right? And learning from other people who put their stories out there that you can draw from.
Mm-hmm.
So that, man, that's when, to me, when that social media becomes very powerful in a good way,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was super helpful for me.
Yeah. So how did your family handle all this as you're going through this? How did they, did they struggle along with you, or did they like almost like, we don't know what to do, or what was their reaction and response to this?
Yeah, I think they definitely struggled in the beginning, especially when I was in really bad shape. I think they just saw that and they felt helpless because they had no idea what was going on. I still didn't know what was going on. And
Yeah.
so I think them just seeing that and feeling that helplessness, that was really hard for them.
Yeah.
And they were doing everything they could. They were, helping me as I tried to get help and as I learned and grew, and they were overall very supportive in that, but I think it was still really hard for them.
Did it affect your ability to have friends or keep friends, or talk about that for a minute?
So I was still able to maintain friendships. I think it was really tough to motivate myself to get out and go do things with friends initially when I first got hit with it, because I
Right.
just kind of almost had like a hit to my self-worth. I felt like, man, if I have like this big issue, it's like this weight I'm attaching to myself,
Right.
and I'm almost not worthy of hanging out with friends, and maybe I just won't enjoy it. And a lot of it was
Yeah.
really feeling based like that. Like
Sure.
I remember thinking hanging out with friends isn't the same as it used to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right. And so that was a big flaw in my thinking system, was believing that things really needed to feel right, and
Mm.
that, if they didn't feel right, then it's not worth doing. And
Gotcha.
that was really flawed.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've had several other guests on here who have struggled with the same things, and they kind of talking about basically the same things you are. And so again, this is great because I think there's going to be a lot of listeners that will benefit from what they're hearing. So as you start to progress through this, and you're learning about it, you're studying about it, you're getting some help on the side, you're doing your own research. Talk about the transition of where you started to realize, man, I can really control this in a healthy way, and start to truly live my life and do my own thing.
So the turning point with that was probably when I first met with the counselor who was actually trained in OCD,
Mm-hmm.
and they helped me realize that putting my focus into all those fears and feelings, essentially that's the wrong way to go about it. And it's a really interesting thing because we have such a problem solution mindset in our
Mm-hmm.
society now, and that really is helpful in a lot of ways, but when it comes to OCD, it's not as helpful.
Right.
And it's almost like the best thing you can do is recognize that those thoughts and those feelings that you may get, those don't actually have to run your life. And so
Right.
it's almost like giving up control
Yeah.
is the way that you actually get over it. And so for me, recognizing that I can still live a value-based life with these thoughts and feelings, that's what was really empowering.
Yeah.
Realizing that, I can experience something that's really, really uncomfortable, and I can still choose my values in that moment. And I can
Right.
choose to act in a way that is myself, and it
Right.
is the way that I want to be. And
Yeah.
so that's what was really empowering for me.
I love that. It reminded me of Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and he talks about how we're not our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
They're just thoughts coming in, and we can either own those and
Mm-hmm.
label ourselves as those, or we can learn to go, that's just because I had that thought doesn't mean I have to, give up my values of who I really am
Mm-hmm.
in those
Exactly.
moments. So that's powerful. Very powerful. So as you start learning this, I mean, what did that ultimately lead up to for you?
So what it led to was me just living my values more, and that's what was the most empowering part of it, is just that, like what you said, like realizing that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings either, I'm not defined by them, and we can't always control the things that are popping into our bodies and into
Right.
our heads. And so recognizing that we don't have to control it, and having you can have a negative thought and you can choose what you want to do with yourself after you have it.
Right.
Right? You don't have to dwell on it.
I love
And
that.
so a huge part was recognizing that and learning the skill of creating space. So giving yourself that opportunity to make that choice. And I
Right.
think that's one of the hardest parts. And it comes from just building habits over the years. And
Right.
so I'd built up habits of basically experiencing negative emotions, negative thoughts, whatever they are, and immediately responding and immediately going into a reactive mode, feeling like I needed to control them. And so what really helped was actually mindfulness and practicing the ability to just be in the moment with that,
Right.
and letting it be there while I made a choice.
Right.
And so creating that space to make that choice was so beneficial, and it really helped me recognize how often it was happening. And I mean, it was
Right.
happening hundreds, maybe thousands of times a day, where it's almost like an impulse reaction. And so what mindfulness did was it allowed me to create that space in between the impulse and the reaction.
Yeah.
And it's like, now I can choose. Okay,
Yeah.
I have this and I don't have to do it.
Wow. Love that. Very well said. There's a quote by Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning.
Love that book.
And he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Mm-hmm.
And in that space is our power to choose. And that's exactly what you're saying, is you started recognizing that I can create that space, right? And I think he said it. I think that space is anywhere from 2 to 4 seconds to make that decision before we actually respond. And it goes along exactly what you're saying. And that's the gift that we have, and that's what you recognize. And it's interesting as you're talking how important the awareness, just having the knowledge around what's really going on, how that empowered you to do this.
Yeah, the awareness was huge. And I really attribute that to practicing mindfulness and recognizing that it's a skill. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just not that aware.
Right.
But it's actually something you can work on. And, that's something that I try to incorporate into my daily life. And it's something that you can almost do drills for. And that's what, for me, meditation is for. I try to meditate a little bit each day. That's and awesome. What I'm doing with that is I'm just practicing recognizing things that are happening in my head, whether and also just physical sensations as well. And I'm just practicing being aware of those while I direct my attention to the here and now.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So you're doing this meditation on a daily basis. Talk how that's been such a great blessing for you in this whole process.
And overall, it comes down to being able to create that space like we talked about. And I think that it has a cumulative effect. And so I've noticed that the more I meditate, especially regularly and daily, it kind of builds up my ability to continually recognize, when things are coming in and what kind of thoughts I'm experiencing, and just being able to be in the moment with those and then choosing, right? And that's what it's all about, is building that skill. And that's where, meditation has played a huge role in my life. Yeah. And so being able to do that and to practice it and really treat it like any other skill, that's what's been so beneficial.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when they first try meditation, it's like you said, it's a skill. It's going to take some time, and they struggle with it, and then they give up. It's like, man, I can't, I have a lot of my clients will say, I can't even sit still for 2 minutes because my thoughts are going crazy and this and all over the place. And I'll say, well, you're going to have to work at this. It's going to take some practice like anything else. So I'm glad you pointed that out, that you've really worked at making this a skill for you.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is being, I guess, gentle with yourself too, and recognizing that, you can still have compassion on yourself if you're struggling with meditation or all these other things. You can choose that act of self-love while you're going through tough things, while you're trying to build skills, and it's not going to be easy. It never is, especially when it comes to something like mental health, where you've built up this almost like negative pattern for years and years and years usually. Right. And breaking that is going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of investment, and it's really relentless. It's day in and day out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's important for, anyone who's listening that might be struggling with some of these things, that not only is it possible to overcome it, but the key is you're going to have to put in some work, some blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, I know it sounds like you've put in a lot of effort to get to where you're at today, even with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think putting in that work and just recognizing that those things don't have to define you. They don't have to define your actions. I think the biggest problem with it is not being willing to embrace the discomfort that comes with whether it's anxiety, whether it's uncomfortable thoughts, things like that.
Love it. So this led up to what you're kind of doing now with your company, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you decided to do something for a living to help those who are basically going through what you've gone through, and let's talk about your company and what that's all about.
Yeah. So again, it's called Building Brainwaves, and the whole reason that I wanted to start it was, like I mentioned before, just how much I struggled to get accurate information about it and really understand what was going on. And it was tough to get that from a lot of different therapists that I saw. Not to say that they weren't helpful in other ways, but there was so much going on that I was just unaware of. Yeah. And I mean, no one was aware of it. My family couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. A lot of the therapists couldn't see it. And it wasn't until I saw, a trained professional, I started doing that research, that I was able to figure out, okay, like this is actually influencing my life in a much bigger way than just what's bothering me. Because I feel like when we go to a therapist, usually we have something on our mind. Sure. There is something that we're saying, okay, this is bothering me. I need to go fix this thing. Right. And usually the therapist addresses that thing. But what happened with me was I realized that, okay, this is actually infiltrating all areas of my life, and a lot of different things that maybe even I like or I enjoy. Like a perfect example of a behavior that I enjoyed that actually wasn't really helpful for me was, I've always been kind of a business guy, and I've loved to get into the creative side of business with marketing and that type of thing. And at night, sometimes I would just let my brain wind up on these business ideas, and it
Right.
felt good. It was exciting. It was almost
Sure.
like anxiety in an exciting way.
Yeah.
And so recognizing though that by doing that, I'm allowing my brain to go into this ruminative state where it's just churning and churning and churning. And that's what really fuels OCD, is that just
Gotcha.
like impulse reaction. And that's what's going on when you're just letting your brain just like wander off and go crazy like that.
Gotcha.
And so, I mean, there were nights when that would happen, and I would just stay awake for a couple of hours, and all of a sudden I wouldn't be able to sleep just because I was churning so much. And
Right.
so recognizing that little things like that were actually fueling the negative part as well, right? And even though it felt good, it was in a sense kind of a positive experience. I liked churning on those business ideas. It was also affecting my sleep. It was also, it's not something I wanted to be doing in that moment. I would have been better off just going to sleep and,
Right.
being more well rested for the next day. And so it was affecting my value-based actions.
Exactly.
And so I think recognizing that those patterns, they can manifest themselves in ways that we really kind of enjoy, but they're still not a really positive pattern.
Yeah.
That's really been beneficial for me.
Wow,
And
that's
so
cool.
recognizing all of that has been just such a blessing to me. And that's what my business called Building Brainwaves is all about. It's all about sharing what I've learned.
Okay.
So
So do you see like individual clients? Do you do group sessions? I mean, what is it all? Or is it just mainly putting information out there for people to find?
yeah, so right now it's still brand new. I've only been going full time on it for about a month and a half. And basically it's largely social media based. So I do YouTube
Okay.
videos. I have an Instagram page. And so those are just avenues to put out information to educate people on the different things that have helped me. And other than that, I do take on individual clients right now. And so that's been something that I've been working on, and I've been able to work with a few clients here and there, and to just see and formulate, how I can articulate the things that have helped me and use those to really help other people. And so right now, that's kind of what I'm focusing on, is those individual sessions.
Okay. Gotcha.
But the hope is to expand into the future and hopefully get into workshops and
Sure.
do more group-based things, and possibly even get into the corporate world and help educate big businesses and help out their employees. So
Right,
I
that's
noticed that a lot of companies are putting money into that now, but it's still very much a reactive thing where it's like an employee
You're right.
basically ends up in a pit and
Yeah.
then they go get help.
Right.
And there's a lot that you can do to prevent them from ever getting in the pit.
Getting to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very cool. So, how would someone find out more information on your company? What's the best way to look that up?
So best way is to probably go to my website, which is just www.buildingbrainwaves.com.
Okay.
And then also my Instagram page as well. That's just Building Brainwaves. And then if you search Building Brainwaves on YouTube, you can find me there. So
Okay.
those are kind of my three main avenues right now.
Yeah, and you're specializing more in the OCD area.
Mm-hmm. So OCD, anxiety, and depression.
Okay.
I feel like those three they're very related.
Yeah.
And the patterns that manifest themselves within those are all very similar.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I focus right now.
Well, I think it's pretty neat too that you're full time. Even though it's only been a short period of time, to be able to say you're full time that's an accomplishment in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's got to feel pretty good knowing you're doing that.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding. The challenge is definitely being able to support myself on it. So
Right.
that's what we're gonna find out in
Yeah.
the next couple of months.
For
We'll
sure.
see how much of the bank account gets drained before things
Yeah.
turn up.
Well, I think it's just really cool that you're doing this. If someone's listening to this who's going through the same thing you've gone through, and they're struggling with OCD or anxiety or depression, and they're just not sure what to do, and they almost at times maybe even feel hopeless. They've gone to therapists, and it's just not quite working. What advice could you give them? What could you tell them?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I could give is just that you don't have to run away from your feelings. You don't have to chase them either, your feelings or
Mhm.
your thoughts. And a huge part of that is recognizing that you can sit in discomfort and you can really experience that to its fullest, and you can actually really still be yourself in the midst of that. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest things there. And also recognizing that, you don't have to always try to be in control. So much of what I was doing that was negative was trying to control, whether it's thoughts, feelings, even other people, anything like that. Like feeling like you're not in control of a situation is what really drives all these things, and giving into that feeling of I need to be in control. And
Right.
so recognizing that, and then allowing yourself to sit in that discomfort while you don't check, you don't try to control, you don't try and cope with it necessarily. For me, the
Right.
biggest coping mechanism, the thing that really helped me, was just being with the feeling. I don't need to go take a warm bath to make myself feel better, right? I can
Right.
sit with this discomfort and I can do what I want to do in that moment. And
Yeah.
so a really huge thing is just shifting your mindset as well to the values of your life, and
Yeah.
realizing that you're not a problem that needs to get fixed. And that was a really hard thing for me to reconstruct my beliefs around,
Yeah.
because I had spent so much time feeling like this is an issue, I am an issue because I have this, and I need to fix it, and I need to put my energy and my focus into that.
Right.
And it wasn't until I recognized that, okay, you know what, I can actually put my focus and my attention on things that I really care about in life,
Right.
and that's the key. It's like
Uh-huh.
taking all that attention off of the thing that you think is the problem. Because really, the underlying problem is your responses, it's your
Right.
judgments, it's your beliefs around the thoughts and the experiences that you're having. And so,
Very well
really
said.
recognizing that, and recognizing that, you know what, you can move forward and choose things that you value in spite of whatever it is that you're feeling there.
Yeah. Again, very well said. I love great advice too. I like the part where you said, learning to just sit in the discomfort. And what I love about that is it, we think, I work with a lot of clients who, they can't sit in that discomfort. So what do? They go drink or they go do drugs. They don't want to feel
Mm-hmm.
that. But the beautiful thing that you're saying there, Nelson, is that when we sit in that, it always gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Like it might be very uncomfortable in the moment, but it always gets better.
Mm-hmm.
Like it always does. Like here you are sitting here in front of me, even right now, and all the hard times you've been through in your life. Look at you right now. I mean, you look amazing. Here you are sharing your passion and your beliefs around this now, and you've got this company. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's really amazing what people can do. And
Yeah.
and that's my favorite part about it, is that we really do have the ability to choose where we want to go in life, regardless of our circumstances, and we
Yeah.
can separate ourselves from those circumstances.
Wow.
And that's been a really powerful thing
Yeah.
for me, and just to see that in the people that I've worked with as well.
Yeah. What, again, very well said. I love how, how you break it down really simplistically. Like it's just very simple,
Mm-hmm.
really. I mean, it might feel hard in the moment of someone
Mm-hmm.
who hasn't done this before because you've done this for a minute, so you're getting good at it. But I love how it really is pretty simple when you look at it the
Mm-hmm.
way you're explaining it.
Yeah, and that's the most interesting thing about it, is that the principles are really, really simple, but they're so hard to implement, especially on a day-to-day basis, when it's
Yeah.
all day, every day, and you're getting swamped with,
Yeah.
OCD stuff, anxiety, whatever it is. In those moments, that discomfort is real. And
Yeah.
it really, in a sense, it is like an addiction, where you are just craving that relief, and you are craving that sense of reassurance or relief from whatever it is.
Yeah.
And every time you give into that and you get that mild sense of relief, which essentially whenever you do a compulsion like we talked about before, that's what it does, is it gives you short-term relief,
Yeah.
but it also has long-term negative effects.
Gotcha.
And so in the
Yeah.
moment, it might feel good to go double check that door. Now you're sure it's locked, no one's going to break in, whatever it is. But in the long run, it's reinforcing that pattern. And next time you're going to feel like you need to check again. You might check 3 times, you might check 4. And so really slowly building up that pattern is what's the most detrimental thing you can do, is give into those impulses.
Yeah. But again, it's learning to control that and not do that.
Yep.
And that's where the work comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about, what does a day look like for you? Like, describe your day, obviously dealing with these things, but give us a little background. What do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah. And a really big part of that is recognizing that, there are people who have recovered. It doesn't mean they don't deal with things.
Right.
Right. And that's been a huge thing too, is recognizing that, I still have uncomfortable thoughts. I still have uncomfortable feelings. And so my day-to-day life is structured around, first, my values. And a big part of it is setting myself up for success. So whenever you're making big life changes or you're trying to maintain them, it's helpful to build up little habits. So for me, a big thing is starting off my day in a proactive way. I noticed that if the first thing I let myself do is just like grab my phone and start scrolling through social media immediately, that is setting me up for a day that feels more compulsive. And it's just because I'm giving into that urge of, I feel like wasting time. I'm not ready to face the day yet. And so what I really try to do is the first thing in the morning, it's like I want to get up. I want to do something just like a little bit active to get my brain and body going. So whether it's like 50 push-ups, I don't know, jumping jacks or something, whatever it is to get moving. And then after that, I try and do a little bit of reading, and I fit my meditation in there. I try and do about 15, 20 minutes a day of that. And then I get to work, and I try not to check my phone until around 11 o'clock.
Right.
So I'm trying to really...
So it takes a lot of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really what you're doing is exercising discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at your phone. Do these things that will set you up for success.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah, and really setting up systems around that whole situation to help yourself. I think that's been a huge thing. So a perfect example is I don't sleep with my phone in the same room. So I have to go and physically, I still use it actually as an alarm. It'll wake me up when it's over further away, but I have to get up and I have to go turn it off. And then I make sure that I'm not using it for the rest of that morning. And so trying to do that on a daily basis has been really helpful. And so I usually wake up like that, and then I start plugging away on whatever it is that I'm working on, work on that for a little while. And then I do make time to jump into social media, since that's a big part of what I'm doing. So making sure that, again, it's value-based actions, though. It's really easy to jump in there and all of a sudden I'm scrolling on the Explore feed or whatever. So a big part of it is just making sure, okay, what's my purpose in doing this action? Why am I jumping onto social media right now? Is it to post? Is it to respond to comments, to help add value to other people? And making sure that is my focus, and that's what I'm going on there to do. I do that, and then I jump off. And I'm not always perfect with it, but it's something that I work on. And so it's another way to really start building up that ability and that skill of choosing your values and really working to incorporate that into whatever action it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So
man, that's awesome. How do you end your day? Do you have like a nightly ritual that you follow, or is there certain things you do before you go to bed that kind of get you, ready for the next day or for a good night's sleep?
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that I think is really important that sometimes people miss. Like if people are struggling to sleep at night, especially if they have OCD or anxiety, a lot of times it's their whole day that's led up to that. And for me, that's what I noticed when I was struggling with getting to sleep and stuff like that. It was often because I had a very compulsive day. And so I kind of put the whole day in kind of its own bucket of like, all right, I'm going to work to not be compulsive, and I'm going to work on engaging in value-based actions. And when I'm actually going to bed, I mean, my routine is pretty much just put your phone away before you go to bed, at least like 30 minutes. Try to do that. And then other than that, just kind of wind down and don't let yourself just like get lost watching YouTube videos or whatever it is. It's easy at the end of the day to give yourself a little bit of downtime, but you don't want to let that turn into compulsion time, I guess.
Exactly. Great point.
Is what I would say. And all this isn't to say that you can't do things you enjoy. I mean, that's what it's really about. I think sometimes when I talk about living a value-based life, sometimes people get the vibe that you have to be like a workaholic. You have to be
Right.
cranking on stuff all the time,
Yeah.
but that's not the case. I mean, what I've discovered is living a value-based life is really doing the things that you really, really want to do and that you really care about. So, I mean, that can be making time for friends and family, making time to be in that moment. And that's what's important is if you are making time for family, you're making time for family and you're not,
Right.
off on your phone working on other stuff at the same time. And so I think that's been a really big thing is just engaging in whatever that value is and recognizing that, it doesn't have to be a work-based thing. I mean,
Right.
sometimes living a value-based life and doing different things that I value, sometimes that incorporates, watching a movie
Sure.
or,
Yeah.
watching a sitcom, whatever it is. But when I do that, I'm trying to be in that moment with that.
Yeah. I
And
love
so
it.
that's what it's about for me.
Very cool. Yeah. Being in the moment, man. That's, Buddha has a quote about enlightenment. He says, enlightenment is the end of suffering. And enlightenment is when we are present in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you said that. It's like, I just want to be present with whatever I'm doing in that moment
Mm-hmm.
and how that keeps you from suffering, really, ultimately.
Yeah.
So very, very cool, man. So if people wanted to reach out to you and, ask you some questions or they want to maybe even look into your business, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I always respond to direct messages on Instagram, and then I have a contact form on my website as
Okay.
well. So I would say those are kind of the two main areas.
Tell us your website again and then your
Yeah.
social feed.
So website is buildingbrainwaves.com, and then for Instagram, my handle is just buildingbrainwaves, all linked together, one word.
Okay.
And so that's really the best place to reach me, and I'm really good at responding to things there. I do encourage people, if they have questions that are specific to mental health, especially specific topics, I try and do posts on all the different things that have helped me, and I encourage people to reach out with questions on those posts so that other people can see.
Can see them as well because they probably have the same question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really encourage people to do is just to keep that space open, and I want to use it as something that can benefit people who are just like stopping by as well, right? So I definitely encourage people, if they do have questions, ask it on there. I mean, if it's something more personal, I'll answer it through a direct message.
Right.
But I definitely encourage people to go there so that, other people can actually get benefit from whatever it is that they're struggling with. Because that was one of the biggest things for me is I felt like I was on my own.
Yeah.
It's like no one else has this. Turns out tons of people have this all across the world. So there are so many people struggling with the exact same issue that you are.
Well, yeah, and I love that you're willing to talk about it because I think we need to talk more about these things, especially the OCD. I hear a lot of anxiety and depression talk, but not as much, OCD talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad that you're out there being that voice saying, hey, here's what I've been going through. I still deal with it on some level, but here's how I've been able to kind of learn to get past it and control it as I move forward in life.
Mm-hmm.
Again, living your values and enjoying it along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, enjoying it along the way, I think there is something to be said for that. I think that, when you're going through hard stuff and you're feeling that discomfort, in a sense, there's a way that you can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to last forever, which you can be grateful for, but you can also recognize what you're learning from it. You can also appreciate it just for what it is.
Yeah.
And changing that relationship with your feelings of discomfort is so big. And recognizing that it's something that can be there. And I mean, it's like you can almost make friends with it. It's going to come regardless of what you're doing. You're going to experience it. So
very cool. Well, hey, I want to thank you, Nelson, for taking the time to come share your story and talk about what you're doing. And I'm grateful that Andrea, reached out to me and she said you would be great for this. And I agree after hearing this now, and I'm very, very impressed.
Well, thank you. Glad to come on. It's been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, been a great conversation. So thank you so much. Please reach out to Nelson if you have any questions regarding any of this, and share this with anyone you might know that's struggling in those areas, because this will really benefit them. He's given some great advice, some great tips, but more importantly, he's proof that you can go through these difficult times and rise above them. So, man, thank you again for taking that time.
Yeah, thank you for having me
Yeah.
on. I really do appreciate it.
You betcha. Thanks,
Awesome.
listeners, for all your support. And till next time, thank you.